Well, it is so fun to see a lot of familiar names and some new faces and some parents of clients that I am serving right now. We are in the thick of admission season. I am reading essays nonstop. It's one of my favorite things to do. I think the reason I love the personal narrative so much is because it's a culmination of kids, really students getting really clear about who they are, what they want, what makes them compelling. And we're going to go through some of that tonight. But boy, I have some really great essays coming right now, and it makes me really honored to be working with these students. So before I get into the content, I just want to make sure I introduce myself. Laura Barr, I'm located in Denver. I have been doing educational consulting in Denver for over 25 years. I provide consulting for young people and their parents who are exploring school choice, educational advocacy, college consulting, and parent education. To me, it's all combined. How do we advocate? How do we parent? How do we choose schools? None of that's in isolation. So I really wake up every day for kids to find their voice, and that's probably why I love so much this time of the year, because some of these kids I've worked with since they were really young, picking kindergarten, going to college. So it's fun to see how everybody develops. Okay, here's a couple more. Before I get into the content too, I just want to remind people to stay on mute. I am going to be answering questions in the chat, and I am going to be recording this. I'm not exactly sure how we're going to use it, but I'm recording it for my own feedback, and then it's possible we might post it as well. And for those of you who just joined, if you want to add to the chat, how old is your daughter or son? That would be great. And that gives me an idea. It looks like most juniors and some seniors. I was wondering if we were going to have any freshmen or sophomores as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get the slideshow going. And that would mean, all right. That's kind of what we offer. All right, oh, you know what, Hillary? I took your new one, but it doesn't have the, it hasn't been set up so that I'm introducing these one at a time, but that's all right. Okay. What has changed since COVID? So we are in the most crazy time I could ever imagine raising kids. I have 4 of them, and I'm really happy to say they were all launched right in time. So I did not have to do COVID home with children. And for those of you who used to sing and music together with me and watch me have to manage 4 children for many, many years, yeah, that has been a great thing. But these kids are really faced with a difficult time. Not only the idea of kind of hopes and dreams of what they thought things were going to be like, they're having to manage a lot of stress around this college process. I'm really just going to get to the point here so that everybody feels like you have some information that you leave with. In the college profession, we have college consulting profession, many of us have been getting together on a daily, weekly basis, sharing information about what we want parents to know and what information we want to get out there. Number one, the biggest thing you're hearing is schools aren't going to be accepting ACTs and SATs. And so what does that mean for me? Some students aren't getting assessments. Some kids have studied, and then it was canceled like the night before. What we know about ACT and SAT strategy right now is that if you can still take it, we would like kids to still be taking the ACT or SAT if they feel like they're going to have a score that is going to set them apart in some way. While schools are saying they're not taking them, and some by law can't take them. That's another conversation. I can answer some of those questions as we get further in. We do believe that students who have strong scores should use them because it may be an advantage, especially if their scores are strong. I'm going to come back and talk a little bit if they're not strong, how to handle that. But the bottom line is that if they're not strong, we're going to be using the rest of the application to show the student strengths. So the other thing that is changing about since COVID is obviously, and I'm looking at faces right now who I know for a fact had college visits planned and were canceled. Getting to visit colleges has been a big challenge. In some ways for me, it is also has been an advantage. And I'll tell you why. In my consulting practice, I'm not a huge fan about multiple trips all over the country because I don't think schools do an awesome job at showing off their schools. A lot of it is tours of where you look at this building or look at that building, you get a peek of maybe a dorm, you talk to one student, but there has really been no other way to be able to do those visits before, besides if you follow their kind of protocol. Now, a lot of the schools are doing unbelievable jobs at virtual visits, one-to-one meetings with your rep advisor for your state. There is, and Hillary, this is where some of that you could probably put in the link for college visits.
Yep, I'm in SAT and ACT, and now I'm moving on to college visits. So I'll just get it going.
So there are spreadsheets that different consultants are sharing around which schools are offering college visits. So in visit, what I'm saying now is we're talking virtual visits. If I have junior clients right now, I actually had a couple junior clients today. My entire work with them was, let's start getting some ideas about your college list. It's not going to be solidified. The college list takes a long time to solidify and sometimes changes the day before the common application is due. So being able to start going and having those meetings, going to some virtual interviews, going to virtual student rep talks, and you can go to the individual school's website and pick the school that you are interested in and find out exactly what they are looking for from the parent, from the student. The reason why this is also very important is because one of the absolute things that is changing the most, especially for seniors, is this idea of demonstrated interest. A lot of people do not understand the importance of demonstrated interest, and really it's exactly how it sounds. It's, am I interested as a student in your school, and how much interest am I showing? And by showing interest, that means you have gone to a virtual visit. You have gone onto the website and you have put in your email to get email in your student's email box. Your student is then opening their email and clicking into that email, not just once, but they're starting to go deep inside the website, right? So unfortunately, this is what schools are doing. Now, not all schools look for demonstrated interest. I was actually just talking to the rep from University of Wisconsin, and they don't look for demonstrated interest. So there is a way for us to go in and see if they do accept, different colleges do accept demonstrated interest. But for my juniors who are just starting out and my seniors who are in the thick of it, I'm like, you need to open your email every day and be clicking on, and we need to be looking at these, signing up for these meetings and showing what you're doing. I have one student who's a senior who's interested in Leeds School of Business, and they even had an incredible week seminar on leads, and she's very focused on being a businesswoman. So she signed up for every single one of those, and that is some serious demonstrated interest that will benefit her for sure in getting into leads. COVID question on the Common App. A lot of the juniors, senior parents are asking me this. My students are asking me this. Junior parents, it's going to be on next year too. This question of like, what happened to you during COVID? This is something that is new. It gives students an opportunity to share their story. As a whole, most admissions directors are saying, Unless you really have a story, this isn't like, oh my God, I didn't get to go to prom and I had to watch Netflix all day. This is not what they're looking for. They're not looking for kids who are kind of whining about their lost, because really hard things happen to a lot of people. So they're really looking for impact that happened that directly impacted the education experience and why. So that may change for junior year. So those of you who are juniors, when I do this next year, you can pop back on and I'll answer that question, what people are saying. For this year, we're just being really cautious. Unless there's some big reason, we probably won't answer that question. And we'll fill out the application in a way that just shows how COVID had an impact in a different kind of way. The other, I would really say the kids who were most impacted this year, who were seniors, who were starting freshman year, are the students who had gap years planned. This was pretty hard for me because these are kids who were very considerate about what gap year programs they wanted to do, and most everything was canceled. So I think those families who are thinking about gap year, I think getting really smart about what do students get credit, what programs are doing virtually if they go that way. Even as juniors, I think we're just wanting to make sure we have some backup plans. I have a lot of junior families that will say to me, well, we're going to do a gap year and then we're going to go to college. And I think I would want to be having personal conversations with those families to dig a little bit deeper and provide some opportunities that may be more fruitful in the end than signing up for a gap year that we think could be canceled. So, okay. I think the other thing that we're trying to remind students and parents about is that while there has been a lot of change in how the college applications are working, a lot of it's just the same. And really the bottom line is that the goal of the college application is to prove your student will be successful in college and beyond. And so when we think about what that means when we're applying, we're really trying to take in what is junior year going to look like with the context of COVID, and still being able to have a narrative and some stories to tell about experiences that show qualities and values. So when we say successful in college and beyond, what they want to know is students will graduate and do well in their classes in college. Students will contribute positively to the college community, and students will have a positive impact on whatever they choose in the future. So anytime I'm working with a student, I'm mining for these things. I'm looking at, just like colleges do, I'm looking at courses, I'm looking at GPA, I'm looking at how have you been engaged in not only your school community, but in the greater community. A lot of parents are asking me, well, what does that look like now? What does that look like for me now in COVID? Today I talked to a family who is fostering puppies. I have another kiddo who is starting a tennis. He is a tennis player and is starting a tennis partnership with second graders who are looking to play tennis, right? So there's, how can we figure some things that we can do? I have another girl, this is pretty cool. She is learning how to cook for astronauts for a NASA culinary club. I'm like, that is pretty cool. So really kind of thinking out of the box, and then also remembering that this time is a very stressful time. For kids who have are more introverts, I really am taking care of those kids in my narratives to them, that they don't have to go save the world from their living room. But what have you been reading? What are you thinking about? What do you take a stand for if you're in an argument, right? So nurturing and having natural conversations with your kids and providing for them the fodder, whether it's articles for whatever political beliefs you believe in, or a political or some kind of stand, just something like, what do I believe in? And helping your kids get clear about that in a natural way, not just like, you have to believe in something or you're going to get grounded. I raised 4 kids, by the way, for those of you who don't know me, so I know what this is like. students will have a positive impact on whatever they choose in the future. This is something that I have realized since I started doing consulting, college consulting rigorously in the past 5 years. One of the things I've noticed is students don't always know very much about college. So this idea of using demonstrated interest as a way in to get smarter about college has been very helpful to a lot of my students. So it's like, I want to be in business. Well, what is business? What kind of business? Marketing, entrepreneur. I want to be in the food industry. Well, what in the food industry? I want to be a doctor. Okay, well, and you can't be a doctor right away in college. So what's your course schedule going to look like? What is your curriculum going to look like on a day-to-day basis? Right? So really having kids look deeply, and once they know what that college offers, they can get more clear about how they're going to have a positive impact on what they choose. Now, not all kids know what they want to do in the future, and there's a way we kind of handle that with getting clear about values and bringing certain values to college. So again, the goal of the college application is to prove your student to be successful in college and beyond. I also just want to say, I don't know if there's any people here who have junior boys who still can barely tie their shoes. They're going to be okay. Sometimes I have these conversations. I'm like, there's a lot of kids who are juniors who really have no idea. And you're sitting here going, how is this ever going to happen? You will be surprised as through the process alone of applying that these kids grow up a lot. Unfortunately, it's almost like a rite of passage applying to college. It's one of the only ones we have for kids who don't have religious rites of passage. The other thing that colleges want to know is, can we help you on your path to achieving your goals? So I love that, because often when we're looking, we're like, okay, this isn't just about me getting into college. It's about, how is that college going to serve me? So one of the things I'm having students, whether they're juniors or seniors, if you have a certain interest or a passion and we find something on the website, a class or a professor, let's reach out to the professor. Let's set up a conversation for demonstrated interest, but also for mining, for understanding, is what is this college going to do for me? Am I really that interested in this, that I'm going to go to this college? So let's see. The other thing we talk about a lot, and this is something
Laura, two things. One, you have somebody waiting.
Okay.
And we also had a question back on the last slide and in the discussion about SAT, ACT, what a good score is.
Ooh, that's a great question. Good scores. Well, it depends what college you're applying to. So in the context of what I had said about if you have a good score, apply, it really does just depend what college. Like, for instance, College of Worcester in Ohio, if you have a 27, you may well get $20,000 merit. So a 27 would be really good to make sure that you give them, right? If we're applying to CU Boulder, they would like to see over a 3.3 minimum. And if you're applying for Leeds, we'd like to see and they say it on their website. All of these colleges will say kind of what they're looking for, so that you can get a sense of what good means to that individual college. I also tell kids, I actually, I have some kids that I work with who are young, and they're like, well, I'm going to go to Stanford and I'm going to get a 36. 36 is the highest score you can get on the ACT. But some of these kids get the highest scores and they're still not getting into Stanford. So it's like, it's all part of this package. And I really like parents, if there's one thing I can, that I didn't even understand when I was applying with my kids. Notice how I said that, when I was applying with my kids, I was actually not applying. My kids were applying, but we do feel that like we are applying kind of feeling. But I remember this, like, there is this package is so important. So for my kids who are writing essays right now, and they're writing about, their values and their activities of, say, the NASA, the automotive class, the next essay, the supplemental, is not going to be about the same thing, right? So we're really looking at like, what are all of the qualities? Drive. Let's see, I have to keep clicking. Drive, intellectual curiosity, initiative, contribution, diversity of experiences. Those are all of the things that colleges want to see through students' experiences, right? So how are we showing that a student is driven? They're driven because they wanted a new car. They wanted the car to be fixed a certain way, so they took an automotive class. They're driven because they are passionate about film and spend all their time organizing their film, and they're intellectually curious. So they're learning, like, what are the women artists that I love to watch? And why am I watching those directors? And what do I see that I like about them? They might have initiative if they're starting a tennis partnership in COVID. They might be, these are the stories that we're looking for in these little sweet ways. I actually have, I show a lot of my students this. I'm like, when we're looking for the narrative that the students are gonna write in the personal narrative, and also in their YS essays, and also in their supplementals about what makes me unique, we're not looking for these like terrible traumatic experiences that they have had to overcome. I'm not a fan of selling trauma to college admissions. It's unethical and it's not okay. What I am interested in is kids looking at the little moments where they have showed drive, intellectual curiosity, initiative, contribution, and experiences. So sometimes I show them this book, Last Stop on Market Street, and it's just about a little boy taking a bus and how he's scared to get on the bus, how once he gets on the bus, he has to sit next to somebody he's not very comfortable with, and he keeps overcoming. It's the hero's journey, really. It's like, how do I overcome these tiny little moments and grow as a human being? Every single student has that story. For me, my job is often mining for that story and helping students understand that that is worth something, right? We don't have to have these awful experiences. I often, I love telling the story. Did anybody see that Modern Family where Haley's getting ready to write her essay? She's a senior, and she's, for those of you who don't watch Modern Family, she's the Hollywood hit, princess girl, all done up and everything. And she comes down to her mom and she's like, "Mom, God darn it, I hate you. You've never done anything for me. You never provided me with a terrible experience that I've overcome so I can get into college." So the mom packs Haley in the car, takes her up like to the top of a mountain and drops her off and says, "Get home, girl." And so, 3 hours later, Haley walks home, and she's like her hair's all messed up. And she's like, "Thanks, Mom, for the terrible experience." This is not what this is about, right? And this is part of why the COVID question is not what people are looking for, because guess what? All of us. I had one admission say to me, "I'm not really interested because I had to cancel my wedding." So if your kid didn't get to go to, Disneyland on their spring vacation, I don't care. She really said that to me. I was like, okay, all righty then. So let's see, let me see where I am. Any questions so far?
No more questions right now.
All right. So I feel like I want to go into these a little bit more deeply. So especially in the context of like, what is drive and what is intellectual curiosity? I'd like to give you some bullets so you can kind of start thinking about your own student and where you see these things so that you can start helping them see them in themselves. So what is drive? Driven students push themselves to succeed. Driven students usually have confronted difficult situations and have emerged stronger and wiser, and they're confident in their ability to solve new challenges. Again, this can be not trauma. This can just be simple day-to-day, like how do I learn from the things that happen in my day-to-day life. Intellectual curiosity. Intellectually curious students spend their time learning for the fun of it. These students will go above and beyond in their coursework. They love finding unique connections between their areas of interest and formulating new ideas. There's something else I want to say about some of this is I know for a fact that I get to see with my students what a lot of parents don't get to see in their kids. If you find the right mentor through this process, it should be somebody that they can connect with and share, be vulnerable with. I love it when the college application has vulnerability in it. And we actually know through research that the more vulnerable those applications are, they usually pull heartstrings with admissions. When there's that, like, I'm going to kind of let you in to who I am. Diversity, contribution. Students who contribute are always coming up with ideas to improve everything they touch when they act on those ideas in a way that is noticeable by their peers, teachers, and families. They can proudly say, hey, I made this happen, or I made this better than it was before. Diversity of experiences. This is one that I feel like I wish I could tell parents like freshman year. Because students with a diversity of experiences have a background, upbringing, or life circumstances that have shaped how they see the world. And I think this is important because experiences aren't just, it's not like the trip to Paris. It's a canoe trip with your aunties and your uncles and your grandma. Right? Those kind of experiences are the ones that actually truly shape character and values. Those family moments that we create with kids don't have to be these, fancy trips abroad or I have a resume filled with every single activity. Experiences are not the same as activities. That's what I think I'm trying to say. Experiences are the things that we do who shape who we are, where we begin the ability to be able to connect our values to the things that we do. And then when we write and tell stories about them, we get to see who students are instead of have to be told. So when I'm doing the narratives, it's very much about like, I don't want you to tell me that you have drive. I want you to tell me about an experience where you're showing me that you have drive. Colleges strive to create classes of people who fit with their school's culture and mission, but who also bring a variety of perspective and experiences that will add to the school's community. I think this is something that parents don't always get, and that I'm really working with students to get, because we want to show as many different kinds of experiences, which can be very different than the activities. Sometimes that they can be the same. We get 10 activities that we can put on the Common App. So I think this is in here. Okay, yeah, good. Oh, I'm on track. I love that when that happens. Students who create a standout applications link their, and of course I can't read it because there's something in the way. Link their traits to their values, experiences, and ambitions in all elements of the application. So you can see how it's all starting to come together. We have kind of the what are the traits? What are the experiences? What do you dream of doing in the future? So that when we put the application together, we have this narrative of how that student is going to contribute and how they're going to succeed at college. So the way that they do that is through the personal essay. The personal essay, a lot of parents don't understand this. That is just the first thing. If kids are applying to 9 to 10 colleges, which is what I like, they're going to write about 24 prompts. Supplementals are the other prompts. So because of the Common App, many colleges got kind of fed up. They're like, well, I don't know if they really want to go to my school. And they're looking for demonstrated interest. For those of you who were ever in a sorority or a fraternity, it's kind of like Rush, because it's like, do you want me? Do I want you? If we're a match, I'm going to offer you a spot. And I might even give you some merit money, because if you're going to come here, I want you. If we show demonstrated interest by applying in November and either early action or early decision, which is the biggest way to show demonstrated interest is to apply for early decision. That is a binding. For those of you who don't know, that is a binding. We apply, and usually by November 1st, November 15th, we say, if we get in, we will go to your school. And it is a binding commitment. You sign, parents sign a piece of paper, and if they get in, you go. If there's some financial pieces to that I won't get into. But so we have our personal essay, we have the supplementals. Some colleges will ask a question, what makes you unique? What is your feelings about diversity and inclusivity? Give me some examples and experiences. Lately, this will scare you. Lately, schools, especially Ivy Leagues, are asking for students' high school book list. And there's like a lot of kids these days who are not reading. And so those of them who come to me and say, I want to go to Ivy League, I'm like, well, give me your book list right away, because we're going to need to look that over, and you're going to need to get reading. So the supplementals, activities, there we go. Personal essay, supplementals, activities, we get to put 10 on the application. Teacher recommendations are going to be more important than ever. I really coach kids. My kids that I have right now, I'm like, I give them a brag sheet, BRAG, and we write a resume, and they give to their teacher their brag sheet and their resume, and they actually even write a piece to their teachers around, gosh, here's what I really loved about your class. Here's what I learned. The reason I'm asking you is this. I'm asking you to write this recommendation for me because, and here's some things you might not know about me, and really making sure we're asking for that recommendation in a way that that gets some oomph to it, because during COVID, that teacher recommendation is going to be important. For junior families, I like kids to start getting their eyes and building relationships with teachers, especially if you're from a big high school. Then, of course, we have our test scores, ACT, SAT, AP exams, if kids can take them. If they really can't take them, then we're telling that story. That is one of the things we would say on the COVID. Like, I tried to take the SAT 3 times and it got canceled. That happened to one of my students. So we couldn't take it. All right, that is, that kind of summarizes what I had to say today. I really wanted to open it up to questions, and I'm happy for people to kind of get off mute, and if they want to ask a question verbally instead of typing it in, that works for me. Hillary, is there anything else that I forgot?
No, I think it was
I did forget to thank Hillary and Lisette, who I cannot thank enough, because I get all over the place, and they helped me create this document and made sure I let people in. For those of you who came late because I wasn't paying attention, sorry about that. So questions, let's go.
I have a question.
Yep.
So okay, we're juniors and seniors here, but for a junior parent right now, what are the top 3 things their student should be doing?
I think the number one thing they should be doing is making sure they're doing well in their classes. that is the absolute priority, is that they are taking the courses that they should be taking to have a rigorous academic showing, right? So your AP honors the most, and for those kids who, I mean, listen, I serve a lot of kids who have learning disabilities and challenges and anxiety, so not everybody can take that kind of rigor, but it's like for that child's profile, I want them to be striving for the best of who they are. And I want them to be focusing on doing well in class, reaching out to their teachers. For kids who aren't doing well in COVID, then I tell parents, who's in charge here? Is your school in charge or are you in charge? Because we can homeschool and we can have a story and we can have a narrative, we can have kids engaged and happy. So I'm doing a lot of work for families whose kids are really falling through the cracks and they're signing up for private homeschooling programs, or they're designing curriculum or doing things like that. So it's like this cannot be a lost, junior year cannot be a lost year. So advocate for your kids, have kids advocate for yourself. So that would be one. The second is, I mean, again, these days I'm just wanting mental health to be managed. So it's like we really need to make sure we're taking care of the mental health piece and making sure kids are finding joy. I really want kids to find joy through things they love. And if that is film or skateboarding or reading or following politics. And then the third thing, or maybe I'm already saying a fourth thing, who knows, is I really want them to take action on it. Not because I want them to have a great resume, because I want them to know that they are citizens on this planet and they have a voice, and I want them to use it. It's such an important part of what they will do when they get to college and what colleges are looking for, that it's a plus. Again, I'm not saying it because I want it on their resume. I'm saying it because I want these kids to live into their values and build their character during a time that invites it. It calls students to action in some kind of way. And if that means you're cooking for astronauts, super. Do it.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
There's one question in the chat. Is that okay if I go ahead with that and then we'll get this one? Okay. Once you're working with a college advisor, what sort of role should parents occupy? How can parents be helpful when their student is already working with someone else?
Oh, that's a great question, because when I first started consulting, I was really upfront with parents. Like, I really want to work with parents because I feel like it's a lot different than it was years ago, where, it costs $7,000 to send your kid to school. And when your parents are spending $35,000 to $72,000, you bet they should have some skin in the game. And I expected I was going to be working with parents a lot more, but mostly I don't. So let me go back and I think mostly because kids are stepping into what they need to do. And I don't know if that's the clients that I attract or if it's something different. I mean, listen, the very first thing you should do when you have a college consultant is everybody needs to get really super clear. I always say, I have to be your best friend fast. I need to know how much money you're going to contribute. I need to know if there's any politics or religion that is super important to your values, that you are, that is a condition around what college you attend or anything like that. And I need to know what you need from me for communication. And I get really clear about that with most of my parents. And I think once we settle in and parents start seeing what kids do, I think I don't talk to them very much. So I think it's a good question. I would want to have a consultant who would make themselves available to you at any time to give you information and feedback. Does that answer your question? They can chat. They can say yes or no in the chat.
Okay. Okay, and then I think we had another question.
Yes. Hi, this is Megan Alpert. Laura, it's so nice to meet you, and thank you. This is just amazing. I've been madly taking notes. So if you need any notes from tonight, I'd be happy to send you your verbatim thing that you just said.
That's very exciting. Hillary, you could send those to Hillary because she's kind of my boss.
I'm happy to. One of the things I wanted to know is, and you may not be able to answer this yet since we're just in the application process, but how are you anticipating things changing from maybe people who decided to take a gap year and there may be more space this year versus what's going to happen next year with some of the kids who are trying to now go, who took this year off, and just maybe people are making different plans because they're not comfortable going. I guess my question is, how do you see admissions perhaps changing among COVID right now, and just the state of how things may have changed for people applying to college or even waiting a year to go? Does that
Megan,
make sense? Sorry, it was all over the
I
place.
think so. Let me just say it back to you. You're asking, it sounds like you're asking, especially for juniors who will be applying next year, how will the impact of some of the changes that were made, or students who took a gap year and are going to come back later, affect the numbers?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what has it changed their chances of getting in a positive or negative way, or is it pretty much as it would be any other year? I'm just wondering how that may change the juniors this year who'd be applying next year.
I think it's a great question. And actually, I was at a Big Ten conference webinar. I spend more time on webinars than anybody you've ever met. I just always just have them on in the background. But I was at a Big Ten where they're saying, like, for bigger universities, I think that they think it's going to be to your advantage. So Wisconsin, Michigan, schools like that, I think that there's a general feeling. Again, a lot of this is very general, and I get cautious to like say too much because it feels like it changes every 3 weeks what people are saying. I think that there is some question for some of the smaller schools that allowed students to defer, which wouldn't usually have happened. So I have a couple students, for instance, this year who were going to Pitzer, and Pitzer gave them the option to defer either by semester or by year. And so I think those numbers are probably going to have an impact on some of the more, 12% acceptance rates kind of schools. I think they're also, though, having conversations in general that will the fact that many families, because of COVID, have really rethought what kind of colleges they want and what their kids are going to do, that there might be there might be less applications because people are like, I don't want to spend that much money when we don't know what's going to happen, right? We'd rather just stick close to home and do an honors program and then decide later. So that doesn't really answer your question.
No, that actually does. Yes.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Welcome. Anybody else? Well, then I honored my 45 minutes.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
I have been seeing some reports that there are schools that just may not make it through this COVID situation just because of not strong enough underlying fundamentals around their endowment or whatever. I mean, is there any thought towards, I know that there are people who've done analysis on different schools that might be affected by that, but I don't know how important that is as you're kind of picking schools to be thinking about
Sustainability.
That issue.
Economics,
yeah.
sustainability. Yep. Oh, I think it's really important. There's some cohorts of schools I've noticed that are doing group, again, webinars, like come to our cohort of Dartmouth, Bates, Colby, and I attended one of those last week in which they said, we are not those schools that are suffering economically. As a matter of fact, during this time, we have increased our endowment. So, I mean, I really do think when it comes down to it, I think the way that I'm approaching it right now with all of my students is like, we're going to stay on track for the schools that you have on your list. I think what will happen is when we get acceptances or denials, then there'll be a kind of deep dive into the economics of the school. My approach is to kind of keep going forward. A lot of those schools, though, are ones that that aren't as known. So if, for instance, I already know on the front end, I'm not going to have a kid apply, right, to a school that I think is not economically sustainable.
Okay.
Did that answer your question? Okay, great.
There's one more question, Laura.
Yep.
Maybe this is a quick answer. Does it make any sense to stick to school closer to home, then transfer in later years for the name on the degree? Maybe do this to limit costs and keep variables down?
Ooh, I love that question because, I mean, listen, it's pretty research-based at this point that where you go to undergraduate school does not define your future. It's a great book, Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be. And there's some research that says going to your state honors program and getting one heck of a degree, and then, but this is the problem. If you have a kid who's so driven that you know they're going to go to graduate school, then you're like, okay, then let's get serious about the graduate school. The answer to that question for me is so dependent on the student. But I think during COVID, the question is tricky. I have a freshman, well, no, he's a sophomore, but last year he's a freshman at Chapman University. And this whole summer, he cried his eyes out on what to do next. He was so disappointed. Started college, so happy, by March, in a friend's house doing, they just were so insecure and so sad at such a loss about their college experience. In the end, he is back at Chapman. They're not holding class there, but they have figured out a way to create a cohort of kids who are economic majors, who are studying, getting mentorship, finding ways to be engaged and involved. So it's kind of like, what are the resources financially? What does the student want to do? Are they in a place? My fourth son, the apple fell really far from the tree. Like, he's passionate about economics, and my other kids were kind of like, it didn't matter if they just went to state college. And I mean, I'm rambling because it just depends. It's something I'd really want one to think through, because in the end, the experience of Devin going back to CU Boulder with his high school friends, I don't think would have been good. I think that he is thriving, even in COVID, having to readjust, but finding and living into this drive, intellectual curiosity, diversity of experiences. They're creating it themselves despite COVID. So those are the conversations I'm having with families. I have them every day, but it's so individual and everybody's choosing something different, but it's a serious consideration. Thank you, everybody, so much. Have a great night.